Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 256 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is servant leadership. Our quote of the day comes to us from Dave Ramsey. Bosses push, leaders pull. Real leadership is servant leadership. I've been a fan of today's guest for quite some time. His best-selling book, Lead for God's Sake, is something that I've read myself at least 3 or 4 different times. Todd Gongwer is an exceptional leader, and he drops a lot of great stuff today. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Todd, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Hey, thanks, Chris. It's awesome to be here. Appreciate the invite.
I appreciate it. So the first question I ask everybody is, are you ready to positively impact at least one person today?
Yes, absolutely. I'm not just ready, excited to do that. So absolutely.
Awesome. So the number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up. And I was curious if you either had a no-quit story yourself or perhaps a really challenging time where you could have given up or given in, but you didn't.
You know what, really this whole, the journey that I've been on in the last 10 years, I mean, I wrote the book 10 years ago, really didn't plan on it leading to what it's led to. Didn't plan on doing what I'm doing now as a vocation, but thankfully God had a different plan, and so the journey itself has been unbelievably unique. But there's no doubt there has been many times where you naturally, I think it's like this with any small business owner, when you go out on a limb and you start to take risks, you have that balance of I want to impact and I want to be obedient to my call. At the same time, I have to support my family. And about 3 years ago, I kind of ran into what I classify a little bit as a perfect storm. In the negative sense, in terms of I ran into some real health issues and had some really challenging stuff going on with one of my kids, and then also hit some financial snags kind of as a result of that and what had led up to that. And so, I went through about a 4 or 5 month period where, I had to battle through, some real deep forgiveness issues because I had some people that had contributed to some of those struggles. And I think that happens to a lot of us, a lot of our tough times in life. Sometimes somebody contributed to that. And those tough times are often the toughest to get through because those tough times also require forgiveness. And a lot of times when you've been wronged, that becomes a really difficult thing, particularly if your kids were part of the part of what somebody else had wronged and caused pain to some of your kids or one of your kids. And so I went through some really tough stuff there in this perfect storm period. And for me, my faith is everything. And so during that time, everything in our family and everything else was kind of, really rocked. And for me, again, I look and I tell people all the time because of my faith, there's no way I would have been able to keep going during that time. But particularly, one of my favorite teachings from Paul in Philippians is where he talks about being anxious for nothing, but in everything, pray about everything with thanksgiving. And that attitude of gratitude, even in the midst of tough stuff, even in the midst of no matter what our circumstances are, and praying in that was a huge part of helping me through those times. So yeah, that was, I've had a few more of those, going back to I probably had one every decade, and I just started a new decade. So I just turned 50 recently. So I'm hoping that one doesn't come for a while, but that was the most recent one. And I'm really glad the lessons learned from that time, particularly even now with what we're facing, I have just a really, really tremendous peace about going through what we're going through today, in terms of things are going to be all right. We're going to make it through as better as a result of it. I truly believe that. So,
I truly appreciate you touching on what you just said, but I want to just jump back to something that really stands out, and we use the hashtag quite often, is attitude of gratitude. And I think what we're going through today with this coronavirus and the pandemic, you said something that was important, is you always can find things to be grateful for with that attitude of gratitude. But the last thing you said, which I just have to echo, is we will get through this. We are going to get through this. And personally, I'm very aware of what's going on, obviously, and first and foremost, health and safety of everybody is the utmost importance, and following the guidelines. But I have to be completely candid with you and our listeners, is I honestly 100% believe that we are going to get through this, and it doesn't mean that we don't care about people that are sick or unfortunately people that we lose. But the reality is this has the opportunity to make us stronger and better at the end. And I just think we have to lead and live in this idea and concept of having faith as opposed to living in fear. And you had a video that I watched a couple weeks ago you put out, and you talked about in regards to fear, and it doesn't solve anything. I just want to know if you wouldn't mind just expanding on that for a quick minute.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that, we have that's the great thing about life, is we can choose. We can choose to walk in fear. We can choose to walk in faith. And for those of us, and I know many folks probably listen to this they've had times where it seemed like, man, I kept trying to have faith. I kept trying, and it just, the reality is, one more time, try one more time, because the choice, the alternative of living in fear and letting it paralyze you, not allowing yourself to go down the path of, this attitude of gratitude that you mentioned, and, walking in that fear, it's a dead end. It never ends good. And so again, for me, and I think in probably the video, I don't know what video exactly, but I know one that I put out there that I know I had a lot of friends reach out, a lot of people reach back out to me, was again, it was this thing of, man, what are you fixing your thoughts on these days? And that's the other thing. I think the media, the media in general, the number one, there's always an agenda, and at least in part, it's to monetize. Today, monetizing, the way you monetize is through eyeballs, and you've got to draw people into your message. Unfortunately, the race in the media has become for eyeballs and not for facts, as a result of informing. We are more concerned with drawing eyeballs. So one of the quickest ways we can do that is to spark fear. And, man, this is going to happen, or this could happen. We could be faced with this. We could deal with this. And you know what? The world could end tomorrow. The sun could go out tomorrow. I mean, there's all kinds of things that could happen. And, you can become absolutely paralyzed if you allow yourself to just be drowned in consuming that stuff. So I think it's really now more than ever so important that we manage our consumption of what's out there. Whatever we're looking at on our phones, whether it's through social media, whether it's the headlines we're reading, whether it's the news stations we're watching, whatever it is, that we really, really become intentional in managing it and understanding that the highest percentage of it, 98% of it out there, is designed to draw you in with a statement of fear. And and again, like I said, it's not that there's an element of truth in some of those things that are out there, because there is. We are facing a very real threat right now. That's terrible in so many different ways. But we still have a choice every day on what we fix our mind and thoughts on. And I choose to try to do the best that I can. Again, going back to Paul's advice of fix your thoughts on whatever is true and noble and pure and praiseworthy and excellent. And, those are the things that I want to try to think on every day. And so I'm very careful with, consuming stuff that would spark my fear over and over and over.
I think that's great advice. And I think the foundation of what you just said that I took is the importance of what you are consuming, whether that's what you're seeing with your eyes, what you're hearing, what you're talking to other people about. And I appreciate that. I want to just change lanes and jump back to your book, Lead for God's Sake, which, as many of my listeners know, I'm a basketball wacko. So the fact that this parable was based on coaching and basketball, that fact alone was a book that I would read. But you talk a lot about leadership, and I wanted to just pick your brain real quick in regards of the importance of servant leadership, and if you wouldn't mind just touching on that for a minute for our listeners.
Yeah, so, and it's interesting because that subject, and I mean, I love the term servant leadership. I talk about servant leadership a lot, but I always like to, maybe even define it just to clarify, because I think a lot of times we have a tendency in our society to kind of fall into this trap of, quid pro quo, well, I'm going to give so that I can get. And there's nothing, completely inherently wrong with the concept of hoping that you receive back in return for some things. But I think we get sideways when that becomes the primary reason that we want to be a quote unquote servant leader. I know leaders in both in sports and in business that, all of a sudden there's this concept of servant leadership, and they study it and they go, wow, this works. So I'm going to try to serve my players. Why? So that we win more, so that my players do that, and it's not that those can't be secondary aspects of the result, but I truly believe that central to the concept of servant leadership ultimately is a selfless leadership, which means the motives within need to be pure first and foremost. They need to be truly about helping that other person, just for the purpose of helping them. And I know John Wooden talked about that a lot, about just, one of the greatest things we can do in any day is to help somebody without any expectation in return. I think that's the ultimate servant leader. And I think that's something that we really, really need, I hope, especially through the times that we're in right now, as people have a lot more time to kind of reflect on their life and not only what they're doing and who they are while they're pursuing the pursuits, but why are you really pursuing what you pursue? Why are you really wanting to, be a servant leader? I think that's a core question that anybody should be asking. And I hope that, that primarily at the core of their answer, they'll find, something that's truly more about others than themselves. How can I really help others and, in my serving opportunities? So, man, I think that's a huge, and that's who Joe was. And we won't give away too much of the book, but the dude, he was the ultimate in not just servant leadership, but like a selflessly serving leader. And that's, why I tell people I'm an aspiring janitor, man. That's why I want to be like that dude.
No, I think that's, you said that perfectly. And I think the reality is it's okay, like you said, to want to have success when you lead others and how you do it, whether it's sports or business. It's perfectly okay to want to be successful. But I think the way in which you defined it really, the simplicity of it, and in no way do I want to break it down that it is that simple, because it's definitely not that simple to do. But from a conceptual perspective, I think it's putting others and their needs first and foremost. And I believe in the religion of karma as well, as if you do the right things for the right reasons, eventually it comes back. Now, it might not come back to you. Maybe it comes back to a spouse or a child or a friend. But I believe in life, regardless of what your religious beliefs are, regardless of what your political beliefs are, is if you do the right things for the right reasons for other people, it comes back to you tenfold. And you've touched on once or twice about what we're going through now. So I have maybe a difficult question or maybe a simple question, but if you had to give the listeners just one piece of advice or one guiding principle to help them get through these challenging times, what would that be?
Man, it's hard because what's that one piece of advice? Because there's three that I think are equally, and maybe they're all related to, use this time to strengthen your heart. And by that, I look at the heart. I look at the heart as central component of leadership. I look at kind of the heart and soul as kind of two things that are running parallel in our lives. And so to strengthen, if you back up and you say, well, Todd, how do I strengthen my heart? Well, number one, I guard it. So going back to what you and I just talked about a second ago, I'm going to be really careful with what I consume during this time. And, I didn't even mention the fact, Chris, my gosh, not only the headlines, but let's not forget the fact that most are watching more movies now than they've ever watched before. Everybody's watching all the movies now. Everybody is young people especially, and I'm not saying just young people, but again, video games. We're spending time playing video games. We're spending time watching movies. We're spending time, watching TV shows, binging on Netflix. So when I say consumption and guarding your heart, I'm talking about all of that. What are we really filling our minds with? Even the music, because if you're constantly consuming a message of, if you're listening to a song, for instance, that, fires you up when you work out because it makes you mad, or, and you listen to the lyrics and there are some songs that are just filled with hatred. There are songs that are filled with bitterness and filled with get revenge, fight. And I just think we're again, guarding the heart is it's such an important part of not only our lives, but also our leadership. If we want to come out of this as better leaders, man, we're not going to come out of it as better leaders if we spend 8 hours a day consuming junk. And I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of movies, there's a lot of video games, a lot of music, there's a lot of stuff out there that is junk. And so I think you got to be cognizant of that, and then replace that with the good stuff, reading good books, reading leaders who have gone before you, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr., Abraham Lincoln, Mother Teresa. There are so many leaders out there that have faced unbelievably difficult challenges, and yet we can learn so much from where was their foundation based in? What did they focus on during those times? And all of them read a lot. All of them had a very strong faith. Those are just a couple key things that I think we can learn a lot from when we think about leaders like that. So, guarding the heart, and then filling it with the good stuff, I think is so important this time. And then also quiet time and reflection. For me, that means prayer. But for anyone, I just think, we need more of that. And that can have amazingly powerful effect on our brains, our minds, and our hearts. So those are some key things that right now more than ever we need.
No, I think you touched on that beautifully, and I know who Zig Ziglar was, and he had a famous quote about people who complain about what's on their, this is going to date me and you, VHS. And I think the reality is, like you just said, is we are consuming a lot more television, movies, listening to music, and all those things. And I think what people sometimes miss is that in this day and age, 2020, we have the ability to change a channel. We have the ability to close a message. We have the ability to, obviously not in every single way, shape, and form, but we can, for a very significant part, control what we see, what we hear, and what we put in. You mentioned how some of the leaders you mentioned were readers, and a lot of my listeners are avid readers themselves. So I got to ask you if there's anything that you're currently reading, or perhaps you've read recently, that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
Yeah, you know what? I'm reading. I'm always reading. I kind of have a weird way about this. I'm always reading multiple books, which I probably shouldn't. It'd probably be better for my focus if I didn't. I like David Brooks' stuff, The Road to Character. His most recent one, The Second Mountain, is really good. He's got some great stuff. I will tell you, Chris, the last 2 years, I have probably spent probably 90% of my reading has been in some way, shape, or form related to digital and social media, the internet, all this other stuff that we're dealing with right now, and how it's affecting our brains and, of course, our hearts. This is changing our culture like never before. And probably 4 or 5 years ago, I started getting the question from coaches, of all, from all sports, and some of the top coaches in the country. And, the comment was, man, these, young people, the student athletes that we're getting today, they're changing faster. They've changed faster in the last 4 years than they have in the last 34 years. And, a huge part of that shift, and our culture's shifted. They don't, everything's organized now. When I was a kid, I had to call all my buddies, and we met up at the park and we played, and we had to deal with conflict. And if someone cheated on the score, well, then we took care of that someone, or they took care of me if I was cheating. So, we went through so many, we dealt with so many things different from a cultural standpoint. But in addition to that, we're dealing so much electronically now, and the things that we read and the people we interact with now are so much on our phones. And that is actually rewiring our brains in a significant way. And, and I tell my kids this all the time, and I'm a 50-year-old brain. So even my 50-year-old brain is still being impacted and affected by it. But the magnitude of the effects that this is having on the 10, 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old brain, we still don't know. And, we're still doing this experiment, and it's a dangerous thing that we're walking through right now in terms of, just what is happening with, how much time is being spent, in front of social and digital media. So 2 years, digital minimalism. I'm trying to think some of the recent ones that I just loved. Irresistible by Adam Alter. Alter is a good one that I read. Always love Andy Andrews' stuff over the last couple of years. I mean, he has great stuff. John Gordon has great stuff. I'm trying to think some of the, another really, again, deep book, unconventional, but No Future Without Forgiveness. It's a book written by Desmond Tutu, and again, he's talking about his experience with the apartheid, and all the stuff that happened there, and the how important forgiveness was during that time. Once they pulled out of that period, so I really try to read a lot of conventional books now. Culture Code and Legacy, and I got all kinds of them I could name that I've enjoyed and feel like I've been impacted by. So
I think we're very similar. I tend to read 3 to 5 books at a time, and one of my goals / resolutions for 2020 was to focus on one book, but I think I have ADD times 10 when it comes to just wanting to learn. But similar to you also, I've been reading a lot of different things in regards to just what you talked about, and I think you hit on something that's really powerful. Is things are changing, especially with younger kids, and even as a 50-year-old, and I'm a 41-year-old myself, and I know for a fact the way in which I see things and read things and take things in is changing and will continue to change, because the reality is technology changes at such a faster pace today than it ever did. And I think, depending on who you listen to or what you read, the predictions are that it's going to continue to go that way. And as phones and tablets and laptops and all these things get quicker, faster, more memory, it's just continually growing. So I want to ask you an interesting question that I ask each guest is, if you had to define yourself, Todd, but you could only pick one word, what word would you pick?
Complicated. I'm not sure if that's my wife or I, but no, that would be that's a tough one. Complicated. I would hope that maybe faithful, and there's a lot of different ways you could look at that, both with what my foundation is on and hopefully what I provide, in terms of my relationship with others. So I would hope that it would be maybe faithful. So maybe that's a better term than complicated.
Well, I think the reality is we're all complicated, so I think that's a good word. So I know, and I've seen some videos and things, and I saw something you did with Urban Meyer in regards to his definition of success a couple of years back. I wanted to get your perspective on what success means to you, or how do you personally define success?
For me, and again, you've heard me talk about my faith a lot, but I think, obedience to the call that, I've been given. I really believe that, the purpose thing that we all talk about, and that, even in the last 20 years has become really, really popular. People have, to talk about that word and even to align it with passions. Whatever your passions are, that's what your purpose is. And I think that's a really, really, really dangerous thing. I really believe that, my purpose is, I believe I was created first and foremost for relationship. And again, from my faith standpoint, relationship with God and everybody that He's put in my path. And so when I say purpose, obedience to the call and on purpose, then success for me is that no matter what I pursue in my life, I've done it without compromising and not only in alignment with, but without compromising the relationships that were core, were foundational to the reason that I'm here on this earth, that I believe. So love, relationship, all those things are a part of success for me. And anything else is secondary. The books, even the book that I wrote, I believe my pursuits are about the people that I have the opportunity to encourage and impact. And it doesn't, I also will tell you that we get caught up in the masses, kind of thinking that it has to be the masses. It has to be the masses. And there's young people today that feel like they're not important if they aren't influencing and impacting the masses. And I think, the world is full of people that have impacted the masses at the expense of the people most closely to them. And in my opinion, they have not succeeded in this life. Because if you don't get the things right in the concentric circles that you were designed for, I think you've messed up. So that's the message of lead for God's sake, that everything starts with those people that God's put in our path every day. So that might be a longer answer than you wanted, man, but that's to me, that's success. It's the people, my wife, my kids, and then concentric circles outside of there.
No, I think it's a perfect answer, and it just reminds me as we're doing this interview that I think in today's day and age, and as you said, looking and going after the masses, what I think social media does is it distorts what's really important. So you're looking at the likes, the follows, all those things, and not in any way am I saying those are not important at all, but when they become more important or a distraction for those people and relationships that are right in front of you. And I think in today's day and age, people get put in your life for reasons. And Bob Berg, who was a guest on my podcast early on, he said something that really stood out to me is people come into your life for a reason. Maybe they're only there for a very short period of time, as opposed to some other people might be there your entire life. But if you miss that relationship or miss that opportunity, you can't always go back to those times where those people were there.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so true. That's so true.
So, Todd, for our listeners that want to find out more about you or follow you, what's the best way for them to do so? And can they get your book wherever books are sold? They can.
It's still, from what I understand, it's still typically in Barnes and Noble and Books A Million. Obviously on Amazon and any online retailers. That's the best way to get the book. I'm on, naturally, as much as I talk against social media, it's a necessary evil, so to speak. And so, of course, I'm on Twitter, just at my name, at Todd Gongwer. On Facebook, too. Actually, there's a Lead for God's Sake and Todd Gongwer on Facebook. On Instagram, even though I really don't do a lot on Instagram, I keep trying to get my daughter to help me because I really don't know what I'm doing there very much. So but I'm trying to learn. I'm an old man. Some of this stuff's kind of starting to pass me by, but but yeah, the good side, the positive side of social media is we can, we don't have to engage in the junk that's going on out there, even though there's a lot of people that seem to live for, the arguments and the fights and the opportunity to try to, to get even or to spew hatred. I think, there's an opportunity for a lot of us to completely rise above that stuff and do nothing but be positive and encouraging on there. And we need more people doing that, so that some of these stupid trends that start popping up on hashtags that I look at and I just roll my eyes and go, are you kidding me? Seriously? You people are trending that? And, it's sad because all it is hatred and hate, blame and hatred. I don't care what you're thinking, what your political affiliation is, your religious background, whatever. Blame and hatred they never fix anything. And we're in a society today that unfortunately there's a lot of messages that are trying to get us to believe otherwise. So yeah.
No, I love that. And one thing I just want to touch on before I ask you the last question is I think that it's amazing what you said is the positive side of social media. I think so many people talk about all the negatives and, like you said, the blame, the hatred, some of those things that are trending. But what I always talk about is we have the ability to, for the most part, control what we see on our social media feeds. So if there's somebody, even it could be a friend, could be a colleague, could be a coworker, if he or she is spreading things or saying things that are not of interest to you, it doesn't mean you have to unfriend the person. It doesn't mean you have to, delete them from your phone and never talk to them again. But you can pretty easily mute them and say, you know what, I'll still be friends with you. I'll still say hello. Our kids maybe hang out. But the reality is, if you're putting anti-stuff or hatred towards this, I just don't need to listen to it. I don't need to see it. I don't need to watch it. So I'm glad you touch on that. And then the last question I ask everybody is just like to see if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
Be encouraged. There are so many, every difficult time in our life, you never, I can't remember where I read this the other day, but it was somewhere it was talking about, you just never hear somebody say, man, I was on a vacation in Hawaii and that just changed me so much. It just really made me realize, what really matters in life and what's most important and things. The things that matter most and the times in our lives that are most powerfully shaping in a positive way in our lives are typically the tough times. And I think right now, if this isn't posing a challenge to the vast, to the masses, I don't know what is. All of us are hit by this thing in one way or another. And so, use it as an opportunity to say, okay, let's reassess. Can I get quiet more? How can I better manage my consumption? How can I grow during this time? How can I build, grow in the relationships that are around me that now I have more of an opportunity to have dinner with the kids or the family, night after night, or I have more of an opportunity. Some of my neighbors, I know there's a widow or somebody that lives close to me that I can call or maybe even FaceTime and just say, hey, how are you doing? Checking in with them. There's so many opportunities right now that are out there for us to be an encouragement to others and to use this time to grow and become even better than we were before. That I want to just challenge and encourage everybody to just, don't get caught up again, going back to the beginning, Chris. Don't get caught up in the fear aspect of things. Have faith. It's going to get better, and let's use it to make sure that we're growing and developing and coming out of this stronger than ever before. So that would be my challenge.
I love it. I think it's a perfect way to end today's podcast. So, Todd, I truly appreciate it, and I hope you and I can connect again soon.
Yeah, man. I appreciate this too, Chris. It's been fun. Loved it, and I wish you all the best. And definitely, let's stay in touch.
Thank you for listening to episode number 256. In addition to being a fantastic writer, Todd is an even better person. He delivers some very interesting and definitely thought-provoking comments and perspectives on both media as well as social media. His parting words, I felt, were spot on. As we are going through these challenging times, we can all use it as an opportunity to grow, learn, and being an encourager. I challenge you today, as you are listening to this episode and over the next few days, be an encourager, learn, grow, and try and become the best version of yourself. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.